Hello and welcome to the October edition of Lowell Remembers. I'm Director of Municipal Programming at LTC, Brian Dorrington, and I'm here with Lowell historian, TV personality, radio personality, ex-educator, and pretty much everything else.
Yeah.
Jim, Mr. Peters.
Thank you very much.
How you doing, Jim?
I'm fine.
All right. So today we have a very interesting topic, something I knew absolutely nothing about, and that is the Merrimack Valley car racing course that was in Lowell. So Jim, why don't you tell us a little bit more about this racetrack?
Well, the racetrack itself it went all the way from Tyngsboro to Lowell.
Mm-hmm.
And they even composed a song to it, which I'll get to later.
Okay.
But
You gonna sing it?
I don't know what the tune was. I just know what the words were.
Okay.
And what happened was that in 1908 they had a smaller race that kind of embedded in everybody this desire to have a larger race in 1909.
Yeah, okay, so let's establish the years. So this was in the early 1900s, right?
Very early 1900s.
So cars were not even
10 years old.
10 years old. They were not popular on the market. They were not for general consumers. They were still
Lowell took a real shine to them for some reason.
Right.
So what that reason was, I'm not exactly sure.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the pictures that were in the newspaper when I went to the newspaper for this were incredibly simple automobiles.
Mm-hmm.
You know, buggies with the engine on it,
Yeah.
type of thing. And we discovered that the car racing idea came up in 1908.
Mm-hmm.
And that they had a small race in 1908 that really embedded the idea in people's minds. The costs of upping that car racing idea to a national level was $10,000, which was a great deal of money at the time.
Yeah. So this was a professional racetrack as far as for.
Well, the legislature.
Or the day or something. It's not like a bunch of random people just racing, right? I mean, this was a sanctioned event.
This was a sanctioned event.
Yeah.
And the people who were racing were enamored with the idea that they would have a larger race in 1909 than they did in 1908.
Okay.
Okay, so that was kind of important. And the 1909 race, they had to have the state legislature pass a bill saying that they could race on certain streets in Lowell. The 1908 race made them that much more committed to a 1909 race. The 1909 race they had to raise $10,000 for.
Mm-hmm.
They raised the $10,000 by going to people with deep pockets, as they say. Person with a deep pocket is a person who's got a lot of money in his pocket, supposedly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the people with deep pockets were hit for donations for the race, and the school children of Lowell and their teachers were hit for whatever they could raise.
Mm-hmm.
And they all got together and they raised $10,000 to put the race in Lowell in 1909.
So just to stop right there. So who is the they? Was there like a governing body at the time?
There was a governing body, and I had their long list of people who pledged money to the project. That included Fred Holm, J.J. Gallagher, D.S. O'Brien and Company,
Mm-hmm.
The White Store, the heirs of Maria T. Stevens, Tyler A. Stevens, the agent, George H. Batchelder, G.J. Reed, and C.E. Hatch were all prominent Lowellians who gave to the effort.
Okay, so what's happening now is there's this national organization and these people.
The American Car Company and the American Automobile Association.
Got it. And people in Lowell are funding to get them to have a race in Lowell in 1909. Is that correct?
The people who are they're trying to get them to have a race in Lowell, and they want the race to be the biggest one that anybody's ever seen.
Wow.
So it was
Mm-hmm.
for the time. It was the largest race that anybody's ever seen. It was so well attended that all the mills in town closed down.
Wow.
For 4 days, and allowed their people to go to the car races because that's where the people really wanted to be. And so there were, when the president, well, we'll get to that in a minute, but
Yeah.
they went to Lowell residents and they tried to raise the money. They raised the money and got an idea of what they wanted the track to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And the track was comprised of various, mostly streets in Lowell and Tingsboro.
Mm-hmm.
And they would go around and around the way, and there were 150,000 people watching it back then. But when everybody was taking horses to or steam not steam engines, but can't remember what they call them.
Yeah. Well, so it's not a track like we would think of, like NASCAR races.
NASCAR races, no, no.
This is like actually through streets that are already.
Well, on streets and,
Wow.
and through sections that were cut off and made to fit an automobile race.
Mhm.
Like not a street that you would come to the end of and have to take a sharp left or a sharp right.
Mhm.
They were carved, and you could take a curve and be relatively safe in the curve, as opposed to coming to almost a stop and then trying to turn left or something like that.
Wow.
So they passed this race idea past the state legislature because it turned out that a lot of the people who were being affected by the cars that were going to come around their property had protested some of the activities of the AAA and the ACA and Mr. Hines, who was the president of the local auto club.
Mm-hmm.
And they took it to the legislature, and the legislature passed a bill saying that for one day, for I think 3 days, they could have a race course consisting of this path, this path, this path, and this path.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up with a really decent race course. But at the last minute, Mrs. Shaw sued them.
And now, who is Mrs. Shaw now?
Mrs. Shaw was just a person who didn't want the race to go by
Just some
her yard.
random person who was
Right.
upset. One of the only curmudgeons who doesn't want to see this great new race of all these
These brand new automobiles that
Yeah.
nobody had ever seen before.
There's always one like that.
Yeah, well, she sued and she sent it to the court,
Mm-hmm.
and the court decided for Lowell.
Okay.
So that's how we got the racetrack. And
So this must have been planned for a long time. I mean, to go to the legislature, have them weigh in, to have a suit that finally goes before the judge, and then have the event after that. I mean, that takes time to do all those things.
Well,
I imagine this event took a long time and was a big effort to plan.
I saw it as it was supposed to take place on Labor Day,
Okay.
because that was the day that they wanted the big race to take place. And I saw the plans, and the people were very excited about the plans.
Yeah.
There was a lot of excitement towards this race.
Mm-hmm.
Because this race was billed as and was the biggest race of cars that had ever taken place up until this point.
Mm-hmm.
So they saw it as being something that would happen again and again and again, and it didn't end up being that way. They did do it in different stages afterwards, but
Mm-hmm.
but I think ultimately they ended up building a racetrack in Pawtucketville, where the old Pawtucket Drive-In used to be behind Boomers.
And that is more of the way we think of a racetrack nowadays.
Right. This was going around in a circle.
Yeah.
But this first one wasn't like that.
Yeah, it was a road race.
It was a road race, right? And the cars that they were racing were modern for their times, and that was kind of important. And the thing that everybody was trying to do was to race and run a 60-second mile. So they wanted to race a mile in 60 seconds because Barney Oldfield had done it out west. And so they wanted to do the same thing or do better. And they did.
Wow.
So that was kind of interesting. The thing was that there were a lot of complicated issues that had to come before the Lowell car aficionados group that Mr. Hines was running.
All right, so now let's get into how big this event was and some of the famous people in attendance. We'll end with one of the more famous people. But who was at this event?
Virtually all of Lowell.
Yeah.
Okay, and the people who own Lowell mills closed down their mills and went to the event. There was a area off to the side for bleachers for the women and men to sit and watch the race go by. 150,000 people were probably there.
Wow.
And 30,000 more people showed up because the President of the United States decided that he was vacationing in Beverly, Massachusetts, and why not come in and watch the race? So that would be William Howard Taft.
Taft at the time. So Taft was at this race in Lowell.
Taft was at this race in Lowell, according to the Lowell Sun.
I'm sure that's not a very well-known fact. I'm sure a lot of people don't know that President Taft actually came to Lowell. But you did original research. You were in the library and you were looking up original sources.
I was looking specifically for some indication that Taft didn't come.
Yeah.
And instead, what I got was that Taft did come.
That Taft did come.
Yeah.
Wow, it's amazing what you can dig up in those archives.
Yeah, it really is amazing.
And so now some of the racers, these people were actually kind of celebrities almost, right? At the time, this wasn't like a small thing. These were known people.
These were people who were developing their own group of fans.
Followings, yeah.
Yeah, followings.
Yeah.
And these were people who were developing their own group of fans, and the predominant group that was watching the race to make sure it was fair and everything was done properly and everything was the AAA, the American Automobile Association, which dates back that far, which I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that it dated back that far. And they were the ones who said that they had to raise $10,000. One of the event organizers said the event will come here if the $10,000 is raised and is the biggest thing that national manufacturers of cars can finance. So they went back to the car manufacturers and asked them for money too, and they got it. And this was a big race. This was the Indianapolis 500 of its time.
Right.
So.
And it wasn't just one race. They had
multiple races.
They had multiple races, and then they had some boxing events, right? And
they had a carnival.
A carnival,
which is what they called the carnival. I couldn't find out what a carnival was back then.
Yeah, what was considered?
I don't know if they had a Ferris wheel, which was a relatively new invention. I don't know if they had rides. They probably had rides on horses, drawn by people and stuff. But I don't know if they had thrill rides of any sort. Roller coasters. I don't know if the roller coaster was out yet.
Yeah, I don't know if those were around back then.
I don't either. So I didn't include those in the in what I said was there. But the Automobile Association of America was one of the principal backers of the event, and big money was committed to this race. The 3As do not back anything unless they know perfectly well that it's going to hit the country good and hard, was a quote. And 1910 models were to be exhibited. This was in 1909, in September of 1909. So this is where they
So it was like
came
a
up.
car show as well?
Yeah, this is where they came up with the idea of showing next year's models in the fall. This is the first time that they ever did that.
Wow.
And Buick had a, I'm not sure at that point if Buick had a dealership in Lowell, but I'm pretty sure they did. And that would be down by the auditorium. And there's still a sign overhead over the place by the auditorium that says Buick or Pontiac or whoever it was, cars sold here, type of thing. And Francis Qua, a harbinger of a famous Lowell, that's kind of an interesting story, but we can work that in later.
So I just wanted to talk about some of the cars in this race because I'm not a car guy,
Right.
but I pulled up, I have a list of all the racers and all the cars they drove. I think there were 24 racers, and some of these brands, I don't know, so there was Harry Grant drove an Alco, or ALCO, I don't know
Right.
what that is. There was an Ernest Stalker who drove a Benz. There was an unknown driver who drove a Knox. A Fred Belcher who drove a Knox.
Right.
An Al Dennison who drove a Knox. I have no idea what a Knox is, by the way.
Uh,
Herb Little drove an Apperson. Another unknown driver drove a Lozier or Logier. Al Poole drove an Isotta Forcini.
Right.
These are some things I've never heard of. You said you've heard of this next one. Huey Hughes, great name by the way, drove an Alan Kingston.
I've heard of Helen Kingston's, yeah.
And then Bob Berman was driving a Buick.
Right.
Louis Chevrolet is the guy's name, drove a Buick. Louis Strang drove a Buick. Ralph De Palma drove a Fiat. Another unknown person drove a Fiat. And then H.A. DeVoe drove a Renault, or however you pronounce it. So those are cars that I've never heard of. And we'll throw some pictures of those cars up for the audience to look at what type of cars we're talking about.
Yeah, I'll have to go back to the I couldn't get a good copy off the copier.
Yeah.
So we have to go back and show the cars.
We got the internet these days. We can find some great things to show these
That's
people.
true. That's true. I forgot about that. Anyway, City Hall was very excited because it was going to go right past City Hall and part of the racetrack. And so City Hall was very excited, and a number of places were really excited. The car companies that you mentioned, the Chevrolet didn't work.
The Buick, I think, didn't work.
No, the Buick worked. He won first place in one of the minor races.
Oh, okay, that's what. So there was a Lewis Chevrolet.
There was the Lewis Chevrolet, and the Chevrolet didn't work.
Okay, all right, there we go. That's what it is.
So that was part of the problem. It was embarrassing for Chevrolet, but it was just one of those things that happened. And another car caught fire the day before the race during trials.
Okay.
And they had to put it out with a fire extinguisher, which they had at the time, which I didn't know they had fire extinguishers at the time. I thought they had to dump water on everything they got caught on fire, but that obviously wouldn't work with a gasoline fire.
Yeah.
So they used a fire extinguisher for it. And a cartoon feature showed the mayor trying to sing up to they had balloon races
Sorry, what?
big balloons.
Oh, balloons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the big balloons.
Hot air balloons.
Hot air balloons.
Yeah.
They had hot air balloon races, and they had the mayor singing a song about balloon races before the event. And I don't know how they got the mayor to sing the song, but
You have the lyrics, right?
not for that event. No,
Oh, okay.
I have the
Yeah,
lyrics for
verses.
another one.
Huh.
Anyway, so they there was a serious contest, and I couldn't believe this one, which was to give an automobile to a boy or girl. So that's
An actual working automobile that they gave
to a
away?
boy or girl. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So there was one automobile that was raffled off to a boy or girl. It doesn't say who won it, but it must have been a very happy kid.
So I'm guessing there were no driving
There were
ages.
no
at
licenses.
that, licenses
I
at
don't
that
think
point?
there were any licenses at that point. Which
Huh.
Contest rules were not included in the advertisement for the automobile for the boy or girl. It was just automobile, boy or girl.
Wow.
Win this automobile, win this auto, because they had shortened it to auto, but they didn't really call it a car yet.
Huh.
So it was an auto, and also you had to consume, in order to be in the running for the automobile, you had to consume Dow's soda.
Dow's?
Dow's was a Lowell soda.
You had to drink it as part of a.
It's part of the effort, yeah.
Wow.
So that was kind of interesting.
This was a big, well-organized event.
This was an extremely well organized event. It was probably the biggest event in the 1900s.
Yeah. I mean, they got the president there, the early 1900s.
Right.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
So we only have a few minutes left. Let's get to the winner.
Okay.
Who
Well,
won this thing?
okay. Well, first of all, they said the grandstand was brilliant. So
Okay.
that was one poet wrote, "Here we are at the Tingsboro Dip, watching the autos go rippity rip." I don't know what that means. Apparently, they fell apart at the Tingsboro Dip. The winner did 1 mile in an incredible. Oh, this was important. The winner did a mile in an incredible 39.9 seconds, a new world record.
Wow. 39.9 seconds.
Yeah, remember I
1909?
said 60 miles for 60 miles an hour for
Yeah.
for Barney Oldfield.
Mm-hmm.
This broke his record by.
Is there a name of the guy who did that?
No.
Huh.
Oh yes, there is. I'm sorry. His name was Hans Homer of Quebec, Canada, and he won the big race. He was driving under the auspices of the Lowell Automobile Club,
Wow.
which was what Mr. Hines was in charge of.
Well, we only got a couple minutes left.
Yeah,
Is there anything else you want to say to sum it up?
Well, to sum it up, this was probably the most exciting thing to happen in Lowell until they had the great bus strike in the 1950s.
Well, I don't know anything about that.
Well,
We'll have to cover that.
Yeah, we'll have to cover the great bus strike of the
A lot of history in
1950s.
Lowell.
Yeah, we can have a lot of fun with what we uncover.
Yeah.
This one was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of digging.
Yeah, you spent a lot of time in the library looking through,
Microfilm mostly.
Microfilm. Wow, I mean, that's dedication. So we're serious about getting you correct history on this show on Lowell Remembers. Well, that's all we have time for today. Stay tuned for us for next month for our November edition. We haven't thought of a topic yet, but there's plenty to learn and talk about in Lowell history.
And the other thing is,
So,
if they have a topic that they'd like to see us cover,
Sure.
let us know.
Yep, get in contact with LTC. They'll contact you to either Jim or myself, and we'll do the research and come up with any topic you'd like. Thanks for watching.